Welcome to the August the 6th, 2002 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. And we're pre-taping this for one of our future presentations, but we're very pleased today because on our history show, we always feature someone that has been important to making history in Grand Prairie and would continue to even make history today if he weren't leaving town. This is our history tape number 463. One more time, don't forget that this is very important because Mr. Mark Inatten is our guest today. Mr. Mark Inatten, welcome to the set.
Ms. Jackson, it's nice to be back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on the history portion of Grand Prairie, Texas. It's a sad occasion for me that you're leaving the city of Grand Prairie, Texas, and we have a need for this interview. However, we couldn't let you leave town without at least documenting some of the things that have been important to the city, to those of us that are involved pretty deeply into the city, and to you as one of the staff of the city of Grand Prairie, Texas, in a very special segment. So, as you're still the Parks and Recreation Director for the city of Grand Prairie for a few more days.
So 3.5 days.
wearing that hat, we're going to put you under that umbrella for a few minutes, but okay. On this history, we'd like for you to look out into your camera and tell us about the real Mark Inatten. Your parents' name, where you were born, and just a mini genealogy for us. Would you do that?
Sure, be happy to. I was born in Washington, D.C. My dad was in the Navy. Actually did about 37 years. He's a retired Navy captain. And I grew up in Illinois. That's where my folks' families were from, and that's where we were, moved to when I was about 2 or 3 years old, I guess. Grew up there, played sports in high school. Really didn't know what I wanted to do. Kind of floated around. Went to school, went to college at Western Illinois University. It's out in the cornfields of Western Illinois. Took a class one time in Park and Recreation Administration, basically
just to get a credit.
Just to get a credit, and that's the honest to gosh truth. It was just to get a credit. And the guy that taught the class was a guy by the name of Denny Howard, and I got talking to him a little bit, and really thought, wow, this is really interesting, and went back and kind of hooked up with a guy who is actually considered one of the leaders of the Park and Rec movement in the United States. He's still alive. Rodell is about 93 years old, and he actually adopted me and kind of as a mentor. And I worked for a couple of summers for the Peoria Park District in Peoria, Illinois. And I decided that what I wanted to do with my life was get into golf courses as a golf course superintendent. So I got a degree in Park and Recreation Administration with a minor in agronomy, which is the study of soils for anybody that doesn't know that.
Yes.
Did that for a couple of years and had gotten married, and of course I was working 20 hours a day, 9 months of the year, and then for 3 months in the wintertime I was around and my wife said, you got to do something different, you're driving me crazy. So I went back to school, got my master's degree in Park and Rec Administration, and moved to Florida right after that, primarily because I had 2 job offers, one in Chicago, and it had snowed 84 inches, and the other was in Florida. So ever since then, I've been doing the administrative end of Parks and Recreation.
And loving every minute of it.
Absolutely. Spent 18 years in Florida before I came here.
All right, now, we're going to get back to the mini genealogy. We'd like your parents' names.
My dad's name is Bob, or Robert J. Sr. My older brother is Robert J. Jr. My mom's name is Maggie Inatten. My middle name is her maiden name, which is Marmay.
Okay.
My folks...
Other brothers or sisters?
I've got an older brother. His name's Rob. Sister Lisa, and a brother Kurt.
Okay.
I'm married to Cindy, and I have a 19-year-old daughter, Taylor, who goes to the University of North Texas, and 17-year-old son, Mark Jr., Mark II, actually, that goes to South Grand Prairie High.
All right. Now, let's get back to when you were in school. You mentioned sports. Were there other interests, other special mentors that you had? Being a Navy kid, Did you develop some relationships in all of your schooling, or were you moved around considerably?
No, we pretty much stayed right smack dab where we were at,
Okay.
which was pretty nice. You know, I didn't go through the, you know,
Routine
the
of
constant
changing.
change all
Yeah.
the time, which I thought added a lot of stability to us, and you know, enabled me to go through grade school and high school with the same group of kids, and you know, which for most kids whose parents are in the service, that doesn't happen.
When you were in grade school, middle school, and high school, were there favorite teachers, mentors, or subjects that really set you on your sights, or was all of this Parks thing a kind of a surprise?
It was probably kind of a surprise, to be honest with you. I enjoyed playing sports, and you know, I had a couple of football coaches that you know, were pretty instrumental in helping shape my thinking.
Would you like to name them?
Well, one guy was his name was Merv Haycock, and he was a little Irishman.
Yes.
He was Coach Haycock was about 5'4".
Yes.
And he didn't care if you were, you know, 6'5" and you know 245 pounds.
You told
Back
that.
then, 245 pounds
Yes.
was a big.
Yes, yes.
Now we'd be little. You know, he told you the way it was, and he taught good, clean, hard-nosed football, and
Yeah.
in the values that came from dedicating yourself to something. And to this day, I carry an artificial shoulder joint from playing high school football, but and I've said this before, I'd go back and do it all over again, even, you know, I can tell you when the weather's going to change.
I bet.
Another coach was a guy by the name of Wally Seabuck,
Okay.
who he was an ex-Marine that just, you know,
What y'all needed.
yeah, absolutely. And so those in high school, those were probably the two biggest influences.
Academically, any favorite subjects or anything that,
In high school?
yes, or on at the end of the high school?
No, not really. I was a pretty good student, but it was just kind of floated along.
Just ready to get out of there and get ready to go to college.
I was a typical high school kid. I was having fun, you know, playing sports and you know, going out with my girlfriend and figuring that one of these days I was going to figure out what I was going to do in life.
All right. What was the motivating factor that sent you on to college? Who was the mentor that brought that about? Was it your parents or a teacher or someone?
Oh, it was definitely my parents.
Okay.
And I mean, they made no bones about it.
You're not going to stay here at home, get out and go to school.
No, you know, it was, I mean, that was just the way it was. That's the way I was brought up. My folks and both my folks are still alive, fortunately.
Yes.
They, you know, they instilled in us that, you know, if you really wanted to make a career, you needed to go on to get good schooling and take every opportunity that came along seriously. And fortunately, when I stubbed my toe, they were there. And
Why the choice of the college in the cornfields?
It was far enough to get away from home, but it was close enough to go home.
To go get money.
You know, and again, you know, it's funny. You know, at that point in my life, it was, you know, just kind of, well, I'm pretty cool. I'm going to go do that. You know, and there wasn't a whole lot of forethought about, you know, what were the implications of deciding to go to a particular school. It was just, you know, I just went. And
Did you when you enrolled in college, did you have any sort of plan choosing a career at that time before you found out about Parks?
No, not really.
You just wanted to get an education.
I knew that I knew there was no way I was going to look my mother in the eye and say I wasn't going to go to college.
Yes.
And I knew that I wanted to go to college. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I started out in the first two, at the time, Western Illinois was on quarters. So the first two quarters, I just kind of took basic classes, and it wasn't until spring quarter that I met Dr. Howard. And
Tell me about this Dr. Howard.
well, he was kind of he was a young guy
Yes.
that, I mean, the passion that he talked about, about what it was like to create something in a community that added to the quality of life for people.
Had an influence on kids.
Yeah, and and I had kind of started to get an itch because I've always enjoyed playing golf, and I thought, boy, that'd really be cool to get into running a golf course, and I've always liked to tinker in the yard, and I saw it as kind of an outgrowth of that. So I talked a little bit to him about that, and he said, yeah, I mean, it's operating golf courses is a
it's a coming thing.
Is a natural outgrowth in the park and rec field. And there are actually curriculums, agronomy curriculums, turfgrass curriculums, if you really wanted to be a superintendent. So I kind of came in the back door from that standpoint. But from there, he got me going into some other classes and actually got me straightened out because I was having a lot of fun in college and spending a lot of my parents' money.
Yes.
And that kind of gave me some direction and started making me take life seriously for probably the first time. And just, more and more as I started talking to Dr. Howard and a couple of the other professors, and they steered me to talking to Mr. Owens, Rodell Owens, who was one of my early mentors. And I went and visited Mr. Owens and asked him, told him what I wanted to do, and he gave me some ideas about what I might consider. Went back and started taking classes in agronomy.
Yes,
and really got me steered into that. And it was Mr. Owens that gave me my first job.
Oh,
it still chokes me up, but I mean. Yeah. He took a real flyer on that one.
Yes, he did. He was braver than Dick Tracy.
Yeah, very much so, very much so.
Yes. Yeah. And when you graduated from college, what was the next step in your life?
Well, I worked for 2.5 years as a golf course superintendent and manager.
Where?
In Peoria, Illinois.
In Peoria.
Illinois has park districts, which is a separate taxing legislation. It's a special district. I worked for 2.5 years and had gotten married at that point.
All right, now let's stop and get married.
Okay.
Give us the name of your wife and her maiden name and where you met her, and did she propose or did you propose?
My wife is Cindy, and her maiden name is Anderson. She's from a little farm community about 60 miles west of Chicago called Sandwich, Illinois. And
did you meet her at college?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Was standing out in front of my fraternity house, and she and a couple of her friends walked by, and so myself and a couple of the other brothers invited them in, and and we started going out, and I guess about 2 years later, I asked her to marry me, and that was 27 years ago. So.
And how time flies when you're having fun.
Well, she probably wouldn't always agree with you on that one, but I've probably given her a couple of challenges along the way to keep me in line. But we were married about 7 years before my daughter was born. So we had a lot of chance as a couple to grow. And
did she work out of the home? Or have a career?
Well, early on, she actually did some craft business out of the home. She had a small craft business.
Good.
She was very good at it. And then when the kids were born, she actually she did daycare out of the home.
Oh, good.
And then as they were old enough, she got into the orthodontic field, and right now works for Dr. Chester Spencer down at the Brace Place.
Who did my braces when I was 65 years old. Isn't that great? Oh, Dr. Spencer's wonderful.
Yeah, he is. He really is. He's a terrific guy. And she's been there almost as long as I've been with the city.
Yes.
So.
That's wonderful. And he's going to faint her moving to Chandler, Arizona. Just like everyone at the city fainted when they found out that Mr. Inatten, our Parks and Recreation Director, and we're going to have to make you one emeritus because you've had one of the most wonderful challenges. But tell me about going to Florida. What brought you to Florida?
Well, I said a little bit earlier, when I got out of graduate school, I had I had two job offers. One was just north of Chicago, and the other one was just in the St. Petersburg, Florida area. And it had snowed 84 inches the winter that I was in graduate school. And Florida was paying $1,000 more. So that was a real easy choice. So I loaded Cindy up in the car and we moved to Florida. And didn't know anybody. Just, you know, we were young enough that that would work. And so went to work down there as for a city of about 50,000 as the director of parks.
And the name of the city?
Largo, Florida.
Largo, Florida. Okay. All right.
And was there for about 5 years and started getting the itch because it was Parks and Recreation were two separate departments in Largo.
Oh, I see.
Which was a little strange.
Yeah.
And, from a career standpoint, I knew that I needed
both
to get into both. So I went to work in northern Florida for the city of Ocala, which at the time was about 35,000. It was a smaller city, but I got to both Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
Was there for about 2 years and got a knock on the door from a guy that I knew down in South Florida. Gave me an opportunity to be an assistant director in a bigger city, a fairly wealthy community, which was a whole different concept for service delivery. And I worked for him for 3.5 years, and then I decided, you know, I think it would be really fun if I went to work for a great big organization. And I went to work for Palm Beach County as a division director. And it was funny because, and that's where I was when I came to Grand Prairie, it was such a huge organization that my division was larger than the department was here. And but you know, there were a lot of interesting things. We had 12 beach parks that were part of my responsibility, spread out over 65 miles.
Wow.
You know, I mean, so you know, I went from a city of about 80,000 to 5,000 square miles.
Yes.
And what really attracted me to Grand Prairie when this position opened up was that, first and foremost, South Florida we didn't think was a really great place for our kids to grow up.
All right, now we've had kids in Florida then.
Oh, yeah, we kind of jump all around.
Yes, let's have these kids in Florida before we leave there and come to Grand Prairie.
My daughter Taylor was born while I was working in Largo.
Yeah.
And then my son Mark was born while I was working in Ocala. So, you know, it was funny when we were here, I guess, about 2 years, and we had an ice storm. And there was just a little bit of snow. My kids had never seen snow, and they were, well, my daughter was in, I think, 7th grade.
Yes.
And, you know, so, I mean, we really looked kind of crazy because we had all these little snowmen about 3 inches tall out in the front yard because my kids had never seen snow.
Yes.
And so they're out there building these little snowmen. It was kind of cute, but, okay, so where are we at now?
We've gotten the children born, and we're getting ready to leave Florida,
Yeah.
and they're going to all come along with you.
Yeah.
What brought you to Grand Prairie? Did you see it in a paper? Did someone invite you? What was your incentive to come to Grand Prairie, Texas?
Well, at the time, I was a division director, and I worked for a guy that was, Dennis was about 5 years older than I was.
Dennis whom?
Dennis Eshelman.
All right.
Just an incredibly brilliant individual. Just, I mean, he's one of those people that, just listen to him every day, you learn stuff. And it's funny, I go back now and I still think of things that Dennis taught me. But Dennis wasn't going anywhere. You know, I mean, he had, this huge department, and he was from Palm Beach County. He grew up there, so
wanted to stay there forever.
Yeah, and I was getting the itch. I wanted my own shop.
Yeah.
And I noticed in a professional journal that Grand Prairie was looking for a director of Parks and Recreation. I knew a guy that had come to Florida from Temple, Texas, and I called Bill and I asked him, I said, what do you know about Grand Prairie? And he said, well, I don't know a lot about Grand Prairie. He said, but my goal was always to be an assistant director in Dallas. And he said, it's a great area of the Metroplex. He said, I'd check it out. So I invested a stamp, and it was kind of funny. They asked me to fly over to Tampa to do a video interview, and the camera kept breaking down. And so the interview tape that they sent was about 30 seconds of me laughing on tape. Because for an hour and a half,
what an impression.
yeah, that's all they got of me. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. So I was very surprised when, when they called and said, well, we'd like you to come out for an interview. I thought, well, I guess maybe they didn't have anybody else.
Here's a happy Parks and Recreation Director prospect.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It's,
and so who was the city manager and who interviewed you? And
Gary Gwynn was the city manager. Belinda Espinoza was the assistant
to the city
manager at the time. And there were a couple of other city managers that and assistant city managers from around the Metroplex that Gary had asked to sit in on the interview. And went through the interview, and a couple of days later I got a phone call that they asked me to fly back out and bring Cindy, and and I guess the rest is
history.
Is history.
That's what we're doing, is a history show. Yeah. And so it brought you to Grand Prairie in the magic year of 1994?
Yes, ma'am. I came in April 11th, 1994.
And about April 3 or 4 days after you got here, you had a magnificent opportunity.
I had the greatest opportunity of my entire life, Ms. Jackson. I got an invitation to be on your show.
We caught you cold turkey when you were not wet behind the ears.
And you were very kind. You didn't ask me, specifics about what was going on. You just kind of led me through it.
Since we started out with you in 1994, I thought it was just really appropriate for us to end your tenure here in Grand Prairie, Texas. Who knows, you may be back one of these days as the mayor of Grand Prairie or something exciting.
You never know.
Who knows, but in all of these years that you've been here, now we don't have a whole lot of time left on this interview, but I want you to hold up this honor that you received the other day.
Last Thursday, they gave me a going away party on a Prairie Lakes golf course, and then they actually gave me the afternoon off to go play golf, which was pretty nice. But this is a collage of different people and different things that we've done in the last 8 years. It still chokes me up. It's pretty special. And if you look real close, and I don't know, you can see it.
He's scrolling right? That for us.
Well, okay.
That's it right now.
Yeah. There's Miss Jackson and myself at Winter Wonderland.
And I have on my Miss Santa Claus wig, don't I?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And you have on a Mr. Santa Claus hat.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Tovar, for scrolling that for us. Yeah. So we got the whole shooting match, but you can talk about this some more, because I thought that was exceptional.
It really is. I mean, it's got pictures of some of the things that we started and accomplished and put in place, and I say we because I have an incredible team of people that, and I've said this for years. In government, we're in the service business, and everybody wants services, and we can't always provide that. So what our job is to create miracles and to take the resources we've got and make sure that people enjoy themselves. And I've got a great bunch of jugglers.
All right, but you didn't have any money to speak of when you came here, but I think you ought to thank the people of Grand Prairie, Texas right now for the quarter-cent sales tax.
And that's a terrific point. Back in 1999, the citizens voted to support a quarter-cent sales tax for Parks and Recreation. And it really happened because of the leadership of the City Council. For those of you that don't know, our state association actually recognized the City Council for their leadership because they changed state legislation to enable the creation of this sales tax.
Yes.
It's in perpetuity, and it gives us funds to develop parks, and you can see some of the projects that we've done. But it also creates a funding source. It's the only legislation out there that you can use for development and for operational costs, and that's what the real key is. Because once you build something, if you can't maintain it, then you really violate that trust of the citizens. And but the citizens were, God love every one of you. You voted 2-to-1 to support the park sales tax,
yes.
In the last 2.5 years, we've put about $35 million into the ground in projects. And I guess the one thing that I really am gonna miss more than anything is that we've opened up we've done a lot of playgrounds, a lot of picnic pavilions and restroom facilities. But the big projects, the splash pad or splash factory opened 2 weeks ago. But a number of the park projects are going to open in another 30 days.
And you're not going to be here.
No, and the Ruthie Jackson Center is going to be open in about another
You're going to have to fly
16.
back for that one. It's just sure as
Well,
the world.
I hope I get an invitation for that one.
Yes. And besides all of the quarter-cent sales tax, you received, we have only about 2.5 minutes left on this interview.
Okay.
And I want you to tell about everything that they threw to you, the council and the city, in the acquisition of all of the parks around Lake Joe Pool, all of the TXU land that's for the soccer field, and everything that you've taken, of all of this good stuff that you've received, and you've had to work your way through it with your team. Which is the most exciting of all of these that have come under your direction?
There's two. One's real big and one's real small. The lake parks is just incredible because it gives the city, I mean, the potential of those properties down there. The ones that you see that are developed to a certain extent, and there's several properties that aren't developed yet. The potential that they hold for the city is just unbelievable. The other one that is a project that's always been near and dear to my heart, and that's the Science Education Center that we did with the school district at Kirby Creek Park. We've actually won an award from the state for that as a collaborative effort. I mean, it just, there are so many kids that go through there and learn so much about it, and Tracy Hollis has just done a magnificent job. So that one is pretty special. In
cooperation with the schools, and that's a wonderful marriage of the two entities. That's great. You're moving to Chandler, Arizona.
Yes, sir.
Doing what? We have 1.5 minutes.
I'm going to be the Director of Community Services, which is larger than Parks and Recreation. It's the next step in my career. The city's 200,000 population. I'll have Parks and Recreation, golf courses, libraries, facility maintenance, performing arts center, the whole ball of wax.
Okay. All right. In the 1 minute you have left, and Louis is going to wind us down, I want you to look out and thank Grand Prairie. Anything you want to say to them for giving you a golden opportunity to go to Chandler?
I just hope that what I've been able to give Grand Prairie is even 1/100th what Grand Prairie has given me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And we didn't want to bring the city manager or the mayor or anyone else on this show because they would have taken up some of this valuable time that we needed to pick your brain about the things you've done. And it's been a wonderful association.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything you've done.
We will miss you very much. Thank you very much for all you've done for the quality of life of Grand Prairie. It's significant and it's second to none. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.